Once urine leaves the kidney by way of the ureter, it is stored in the bladder and then eliminated through the urethra during voiding. The ureters are tube-like structures that receive urine from the renal pelvis, as the ureters are really just extensions of the renal pelvis. They are approximately 30 centimeters in length, and they do not function in absorption and secretion, as filtrate can no longer be modified by the urinary system once it leaves the renal papilla and enters the renal pelvis. Its walls are lined with longitudinal and circular layers of smooth muscle, which functions to propel urine down to the bladder using wave-like contractions called peristalsis. Urine does not use the force of gravity to be moved down to the bladder. The urinary bladder receives and stores urine from both kidneys. It receives urine by way of the ureters. In females, the bladder lies anterior to the uterus and posterior to the pubic bone. During late pregnancy, the enlarged uterus can inhibit the ability of the bladder to fill extensively, which promotes frequent urination. In males, it lies posterior to the pubic bone and possesses the prostate gland just inferior to it. The initial region of the urethra passes through the prostate gland. In both males and females, the bladder walls contain longitudinal and circular bands of smooth muscle, collectively called the detrusor muscle. Internally, it is lined with transitional epithelium, which helps to keep the inner wall intact when the bladder stretches as it fills. Internally, it also folds elaborately when empty. These folds in the walls of the mucosa epithelium are referred to as the rugae, similar to the rugae that appeared in the stomach when it was empty. Figure 25.4 examines the basic structures of the bladder. The ureters deliver urine to the bladder using peristalsis, which are wave-like contractions of smooth muscle that push urine through the ureters. The urethral openings are located at the bottom of the bladder. The thick transitional epithelial tissue that lines the internal mucosal walls of the bladder helps to prevent damage to the bladder walls as it stretches. The lamina propria helps to bind the transitional epithelium to the underlying submucosa. The two layers of smooth muscle that line the bladder walls are the detrusor muscle. The urethra is the passageway that functions to transport urine from the bladder during voiding. Where the urethra connects to the bladder, the walls are lined with a smooth muscle sphincter called the internal urethral sphincter. The muscle is controlled by the autonomic division of the nervous system, which controls many smooth muscle structures within the body. Typically, the sphincter is contracted to keep the urethra closed, but as the bladder fills, the muscle begins to relax so that urine can leave the bladder through the urethra. Beyond the internal urethral sphincter, the urethra passes through a muscular wall in the pelvic cavity that is called the urogenital diaphragm. Within the urogenital diaphragm is a skeletal muscle sphincter called the external urethral sphincter. This sphincter is consciously controlled by the brain, so we can stimulate it to contract and keep the urethra closed when voiding the bladder is not convenient for us. When it is convenient to void the bladder, the muscle relaxes and opens the urethra. Returning to the bladder diagram, we find that the internal urethral sphincter, which is composed of smooth muscle, is located at the region where the urethra meets the bladder. The external urethral sphincter, which is composed of skeletal muscle and consciously controlled, is embedded within the wall of the urogenital diaphragm.